Who dat to the Who Dat Nation? Welcome to the Dome Patrol podcast, your podcast for the New Orleans Saints here on the KB Radio Network. And this is the season wrap up of the 2022-2023 NFL season for the New Orleans Saints, who had a quite impressive record of 7-10 this season, not winning the division, not making the playoffs, and pretty much just embarrassing themselves for the past 18 weeks of this season. How are we doing out there? Has everybody kind of calmed down from this season? Are we all right? We just ready for the offseason, get the ball rolling on a new year. I must say, it's been a couple of days since the season ended. Um, my emotions are, whew, how can I put this kindly? I'm still disappointed. Uh, there's literally nothing from this season I can sit back and say, okay, we can build off of that. Well, that's a lie. That's a lie. There were some shining spots, and we're gonna go over it um, throughout the show, but there are very, very few and far between. Overall, rather, no, this has been a complete disaster of a season. Now, don't get me wrong, people. I stated this on a previous episode of the Dome Patrol podcast. I wasn't expecting the New Orleans Saints to go 17-0 this season. I wasn't expecting the New Orleans Saints to go to the Super Bowl and win. I really wasn't. If that had happened, good. Good. But I was. Without a doubt. I never questioned at no point or time that this team would be competitive, that this team would at least win this division. And early on, I want to say within 5 weeks of the season, I knew we were in trouble. I knew it wasn't going to be a good year for us. And sadly, it took 5 weeks, and that was after a victory, because it was like nothing was impressive at that point. And I figured, you figure by week 5 of the NFL season that things would start clicking. The first couple of weeks, that every team looked bad. Everybody looked bad. You look at these elite quarterbacks, they weren't looking too good. Joe Burrow wasn't looking too good the first couple of weeks. He was throwing picks out of his mind. Aaron Rodgers weren't looking too good. Brady wasn't looking too good, which he hadn't looked good all season, yet he made the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers, he almost made the playoffs, but it was a struggle for all teams. So I figured the Saints would struggle, especially adding the factor in you have a brand new coach. We're trying to get a new quasi system in here, even though they sold us a bill of goods that, okay, we're going to keep the same system that Sean Payton had. And, all those wolf cookies that they were selling us in the off season when they were, quote unquote, searching for a head coach. And this is what we got. This was the results of what we got. We fell for it. At least I did. I know there's some people out there who didn't believe in old Dennis Allen. I was skeptical, but I was willing to give him a chance. And the chance is over. It's over. I gave it to him. Midway through this season, I was done with Dennis Allen. Done with Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen was, prior to returning to the New Orleans Saints as the defensive coordinator, because he was here once before as the, I think he was the secondaries coach the year we went to the Super Bowl, in fact. He was on that defensive team. Real good coach, real good defensive coach. I'm not taking that away from him. You could put that on his tombstone, and that is scripture. He is one of the most phenomenal defensive coordinators working in the NFL today. Can't take that away from Dennis Allen. But as a head coach, when he left the Saints the first go around to go be the head coach of the then Oakland Raiders, he was there for 4 seasons. Well, 3 seasons. He was there for 3 seasons and never had a winning record. Actually, it was horrible. I think the most he won there was 4 games. He got fired. Saints hired him back as the defensive coordinator. And the defensive coordinator was better for it. I mean, the defense was better for it because he really turned the defense around because we were hurting. We were hurting around that time. Defensively, oh my goodness, man. A Pop Warner team can put up 50 points on the Saints around that time. He came and turned it around. That defense was middle of the pack to top 10 every year he was the defensive coordinator. He has, since they made him the head coach, once again, losing season. So that's a grand total of 4 seasons as a head coach. 0 winning seasons. To put things in perspective, you look over there in Pittsburgh for the Pittsburgh Steelers, their head coach, Mike Tomlin, who I have the utmost respect for. I love Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin has been the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers for 16 years. 16 seasons he's been the head coach. You know how many losing seasons he's had? 0. He has a winning record every single year. And we're talking about a Pittsburgh Steelers who, for like the last, with the exception of this year, for the last 3 years, he was dealing with an aging quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger, who couldn't move, couldn't throw the ball, couldn't do anything with the ball. They still managed to win. He was dealing with diva wide receivers. Claypool, who they traded away middle this season. He got the early Antonio Brown before he became AB. You know, he had to deal with that. Plaxico Burress and all the other foolishness that was going on. He had so much turmoil, yet he kept that team together. When I say a leader of men, when I want a head coach that's a leader of men, that's who I refer to. That is a leader of men over there by the name of Mike Tomlin. That man can coach. That man can coach. And look, I'm not really trying to compare the two. I was just trying to use contrast. But Dennis Allen is nowhere near Mike Tomlin. Dennis Allen is horrible as a head coach. I mean, every decision, and it's not Dennis Allen that I'm talking about here. This is the Saints organization as a whole. Saints, from the moment Sean Payton said I quit, Saints have played it safe. Saints didn't take any chances. They took one chance in the last calendar year. One. And that was the pursuit of quarterback Deshaun Watson. They went in on Deshaun Watson. Shocked me, shocked the Who Dat Nation, shocked the world that the Saints were going hard in the paint for a quarterback, a top 5 quarterback. You may not look at it now and see that he's a top 5 quarterback because he hadn't played in 2 years. He only played, 3-4 games this season? You know, he was suspended most of the season. But he is still an elite quarterback, in my humble opinion. I was happy with it because I love Deshaun Watson. All that foolishness off the field aside, I'm talking about on the field. That would have been nice. Now, the problem with that, even if we would have got him, we would have gave up draft picks, which we end up giving up draft picks later on anyway, but we would have had to give up a lot more, which means we would have not been able to draft a Chris Olave, uh, Trevor Penning, things of that nature. But so it kind of worked out good in a way, but it would have been nice. But other than that, Saints played it safe. They played it safe. Now you can make the argument it was an aggressive move to make that trade with the Philadelphia Eagles to get an extra pick, an additional first round pick in last year's draft. Okay, cool. They made some aggressive moves in free agency. Now that I'm thinking about it, they made some aggressive moves. They went and got Jarvis Landry. They went and got Tyrann Mathieu. You know, but hindsight being 2020, you can look back and say, well, those didn't really pan out. So how do you look at that? But from there on, it was all conservative. With the coaching decision, they played it safe. They brought in some very reputable candidates for head coach. The first interview that the Saints conducted after Sean Payton's exit was Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson at the time was the former coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. He brought them to the Super Bowl and they won the Super Bowl. Real good coach. He went on to take the job with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville were 3-14 last season. He took that job. This year, they won their division and they're in the playoffs. Saints also interviewed Aaron Glenn, who used to be here on the coaching staff a couple of years ago. Now he's the defensive coordinator with the Detroit Lions, which is arguably the worst defense in football. But they interviewed him, and that one didn't go too well. Then they brought in former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores, who is an exceptional coach. He turned that program around over there in Miami. He was unjustly fired, according to a lawsuit that he filed, but he's a real good coach. That didn't work out. They brought in Eric Bieniemy, who is the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs. That didn't pan out. There was another one they brought in. I can't remember who, but it doesn't matter. Basically, all of them were just brought in as whatevers, and because everybody knew it was Dennis Allen's job to lose, and sure enough, Dennis Allen was hired. The safe pick. He's been in the organization. Everybody knows him. He knows the team. Let's just stick with the status quo. All right, fine, whatever. And quite honestly, I get it. I do. I get it. But was it the right move? Well, once again, hindsight being 2020, no. No, especially going by the candidates that you brought in for interviews. You brought in some real good coaches who are proven winners. Brian Flores is a proven winner. Yeah, he hadn't won any Super Bowls, but he's coming off the Bill Belichick tree. He started off in New England. He went to Miami. He turned them around. They were a quality team. They're even a quality team now that he left. It's the same team, Doug Peterson. Now, to be completely honest with you, I wasn't a big fan of that because I thought, man, Doug Peterson, it really wasn't him. It was more Frank Wright than him. That's what I was saying at the time. Now, now I look at it, Frank Wright, who got fired with the Colts earlier this season, and looking at Doug Peterson and where he is right now, yeah, it was Doug Peterson. It was Doug Peterson. And so, and Eric Bieniemy, man, I was really champion for that. That's who I truly wanted as the head coach. I really wanted Eric Bieniemy because he is a Louisiana guy. You know, uh, he has that offense. Now a lot of people are gonna say, "Oh, it's Patrick Mahomes over there. Is Andy Reid making it look?" He's the offensive coordinator, though. You know, he's the one that keeps the ball. You know, it keeps he orchestrates that offense. And so I would have loved to have seen that. I would love to have seen that, especially with the weapons that the New Orleans Saints possess. But woulda, coulda, shoulda. Another like panic move was the abrupt exit of C.J. Garner-Johnson. This was a move that took everybody by surprise when it happened. It was like all of a sudden he's gone. All of a sudden he's traded. I mean, I'm like, to the Philadelphia Eagles, nonetheless. I'm like, what happened? And then for nothing, really just gave him away. And what happened? You know, I mean, he still had a year left on his contract. It wasn't like this was dire straits. I don't understand why that. I still don't understand why that took place like that. But he left only to lead the league in interceptions this season. He led the league this season in interceptions, and he missed 5 games. So you do the math. The dude produced over there, and I'm happy for him because I love C.J. Garner-Johnson. I love him. Truly miss him. Even though the defense didn't necessarily hurt from his absence, the defense was still good, but I still wanted to see him in the black and gold. Then the season starts, and it's really, bro. I mean, I should have known. I should have known early on that things were going to go awry with that opening game. And this is where we're going to go through the season game by game. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on every single game because it doesn't make sense. But I will mention, certain plot points, if you will, about every game. Starting out with week 1. Week 1, the Saints opened up in Atlanta versus the Falcons. This started off as a disaster. For 3.5 quarters, the Atlanta Falcons were beating the Saints like they owed them money. It was ugly. We should have known then. This is how the season is going to play out. This is going to be one of those years. But once again, we were sold a bill of goods because in the 4th quarter, the Saints scored 17 unanswered, and they came back in historic fashion against none other than the Atlanta Falcons, who are historically known for blowing double-digit leads in the 4th quarter. Jameis Winston, he had 270 yards passing and 2 touchdowns in that game, and he looked amazing. He really did. He looked amazing. I was like, okay, this is the Jameis Winston that I want to see. And unfortunately, and I think this is what pretty much put the nail in the coffin of Jameis Winston. Despite him having his best game of the season, which was very short, he got hurt in that game. He hurt his back in that game. I forgot how many vertebrae were cracked or whatever, but he was seriously hurt in that game. But Jameis Winston knew something that a lot of other people knew. He could not afford to miss a game because he knew the second his behind hit the bench, it was over. His job was lost. And sure enough, we will find out later that rang true. But he should have sat. He should have sat, and he admitted he shouldn't have played the Tampa Bay game, which was week 2, when Saints hosted the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. a team who we owned up to this point. We owned Tom Brady. I mean, Tom Brady, it's not even a Tom Brady when he plays the New Orleans Saints is on a whole nother stratosphere. And I'm not talking like he shoots to the moon. I mean, it's like he's out of body. You know, he cannot play well against this team. Early on, Saints had him frustrated. Now the game was boring as I don't know what. I think 3 quarters into this game, the score was 3-3. It was a defensive battle, but Tom Brady yet again, he started cursing out his offensive line. He was about to throw tablets. He was throwing helmets. He once again, his little temper tantrums were starting to show. Then the dreaded fight broke out. The fight between Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans, who up to this point I am convinced, and I hope I don't offend, but this is how they act. I think they act like lovers. They act like they are in a relationship because for some strange reason, every time these two dudes play up against each other, there's a fight. There is something going on between those two. I don't mean pushing and shoving and all that. I mean full-blown fights. And it erupted in this game, which led to both of them being ejected from this game. And from that point on, it was all Tampa Bay. Jameis Winston threw count them, 3 interceptions in this game. And this was the Jameis Winston that everybody dreaded. Everybody was saying that this is the reason we don't want him as our starting quarterback. He was making all their predictions correct in this game. He looked horrible. And I'll be the first to say it. But I gave him a pass because he's hurt. But I had to take that pass away because why are you playing? Don't play if you're that hurt. But he was trying to save his career. And if that's the true reason why, which I'm leaning towards that's why, I get it. But you really hurt yourself more than you helped yourself here. Not to mention the fumbles along with the interceptions. It was just horrible. It was a horrible game. But I was willing to look past that. The week after that, we played the Panthers. And this was another it started off bad because we had 3 division games. 3 division games to start off the season. We go to Carolina, who was starting Baker Mayfield, who I have zero to little respect for. For good reason, because he didn't do anything in this game. Baker Mayfield was 12 for 25 in this game. He did nothing. He made one throw that resulted in a touchdown. One throw, and it was like a little 5-yard dump pass that old boy just took to the house. It was ridiculous. But nobody could do anything else. Once again, Jameis Winston threw 2 interceptions in this game. It's like, my God, man. Jameis, will you sit down? But we didn't have to wait too much longer because I believe they sat him after this. But he was just, you could tell he couldn't move. You know, normally he can move around in the pocket. He couldn't move. He was a sitting duck back there. And then all defenses were doing were blitzing him. All 3 games, they were just blitzing. Like 0 blitzes. And the offensive line did not block. It was a horror show. Saints lost that game 22-14. It was horrible. And so the following week, the Saints had to travel to London to take on the Minnesota Vikings. And at this time, Minnesota was like, were they undefeated or something? Or they lost 1 game or something like that. But they were looking good. They were looking decent. Then you had Justin Jefferson, who is a dog. Who is probably the best receiver in football, let's be honest. Justin Jefferson is a beast. a beast. What we saw at LSU, I did not think would cross over into the NFL like this. He's blowing that out the wall. He was a dog. Well, in this game, this is the arrival of the red rifle. This is when we get the start of Andy Dalton's tenure as the starting quarterback. And it wasn't bad. He had, if you look at his numbers weren't bad. He threw for 235 yards and a touchdown in that game. And I think he only had like 6 or 7 incompletions, but he was decent. And the Saints were in firm control of this game going into the fourth quarter. And they lost. Once again, they get into the fourth quarter, blow the lead, and lose 28-25. It was at this point I knew the Saints were in big trouble, season wise. You cannot go on the road. Well, actually, it was technically a home game, but you cannot go to London and lay an egg like that on the road. Then the Saints had to come back home the following week. Now, normally you would get a bye week after you travel across the pond, as they say, but the Saints decided to move their bye week later into the year, which theoretically made sense, but that was a long trip. It probably would have been better if we had won. But lo and behold, the Saints won their following game against a gamed Seattle Seahawks, who at that time was looking like the best team in football. Geno Smith, he looked like he was in the MVP discussion at that point. I was scared for that game. I really thought the Saints would lose that game. Once again, Andy Dalton started. Well, there's no point saying that every game after this. Andy Dalton started every game after this. So it is what it is. But Geno Smith threw 3 touchdowns in this game. Honestly, Seattle should have won this game because DJ Metcalf dropped 2 touchdowns. I mean, just flat out dropped them. So if we're being honest, Saints should have won. I mean, should have lost this game. But the football gods shined down and said, look here, enough's enough. Here's a win. Let me give y'all a win. And they really gave us that. We escaped out of this game. Here's the crazy part about this game. This is the note I made. The leading rusher for the New Orleans Saints in this game was Taysom Hill. He had 112 yards rushing with 3 touchdowns. The leading receiver in this game was Alvin Kamara with 6 receptions in 91 yards. Flip-flop. That's how crazy this season is. That's the season in a nutshell for the New Orleans Saints. But the Saints pulled that one out 39-32. The following week, they took on the Cincinnati Bengals. I had a feeling we was going to lose that game, and sure enough, we did. But it wasn't because the Saints got blown out the water. It was 30-26, and the Saints, once again, were in firm control in the fourth quarter and could not finish them off. Joe Burrow looked excellent. He had like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. Andy Dalton did absolutely nothing in that game, and it was just ugly. Saints the offense just stalled late. The offense did not move, and this is going to be a common theme throughout the season. It's a common theme. They start off good, and then pluff. But it's over. All right. We move on to a Thursday night game, which was I still can't understand how we lost this game. Well, I understand why, but I don't understand why it happened. And that was against the Arizona Cardinals, where the Saints lost 42-34. The Saints in this game well, not the Saints. Andy Dalton threw not one, but two pick sixes. Two back to back, mind you. On back to back drives, he threw two pick sixes. And you take away those two pick six, Saints win the game. That's 14 points right there. You know, they scored 25 points in the second quarter. 14 of them came from the interceptions. And he threw another intercept later on in the game. But this is the only game where the Saints just blew up in the fourth quarter. I think they scored 17 points. Well, they did in game one against Atlanta with that comeback. But this was the last time I can remember the Saints just went crazy in the fourth quarter to make the game respectable. But it wasn't enough. Yeah, this was embarrassing. This is the only game I can say without a doubt Andy Dalton lost us this game. I mean, he lost us this game. And it, it was, I mean, on national TV, my God, that was embarrassing. Well, the next week they recovered. The New Orleans Saints recovered, and they played the lowly Las Vegas Raiders. Saints blew out the Raiders in this game by the score of 24-0. All that 24 points came in the first half. Well, with the exception, they scored in the third quarter. But once again, fourth quarter, 0 points. 0 points. Now, you might say, well, they took their foot off the gas, you know, and it wasn't really that type of game. It was Alvin Kamara. This was Alvin Kamara's best game of the year. I think this is the only game he scored touchdowns. He scored 3 touchdowns in this game. He didn't score any more this season. He didn't score any before this game. That's why I put an asterisk by this game. When I say the Saints hadn't had a complete game this season, I don't count this. I don't count this because it was the Raiders. The Raiders is trash. That's probably one of the only teams I could say is worse than the New Orleans Saints. But the following week, the Saints on Monday Night Football took on the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I did not believe the Saints could come out victorious in this game, and I was proven right. Saints lose this game 27-13. And this is with Lamar Jackson really not doing much of anything. The Saints really kind of held him in check for the most part. They did give up a lot on the ground running the ball, but they just couldn't do anything offensively. I mean, Saints scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter, but it was garbage time when they finally did score a touchdown. And man, it was just an ugly game. This is the only game I can say, well, not the only. I think there's another one coming up. But this is a game where I can sit there and say that the Saints lost. There's no shenanigans behind this one. The other ones I can make a case for, we had opportunities to win. But this one here, it was slow and methodical. This one, they laid us to bed. They didn't just knock us out. They tucked us in on this one and kissed us on the cheek and told us good night. Don't let the bed bugs bite. It was slow and methodical. The following week, the Saints took on the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Saints lose this game 20-10. This was ugly too. Saints had they didn't have control per se, but it was a game going into the fourth quarter. It was tied 10-10. I remember that much. And then they allowed Pittsburgh to score 10 points in the fourth quarter, and that was that. Saints scored nothing in the second half. All 10 of their points came in the second quarter of this game. I'm pretty sure y'all starting to hear a theme here. Second half, nothing. Andy Dalton threw 2 interceptions in this game. It was, theoretically, you would think Andy Dalton used to play in this division. He was the former quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals. He knows these teams, but he looked horrible again. He looked worse against the AFC North. The only team they beat was the Browns later on, but that was in minus 15-degree weather. So it had nothing to do with him. But uh, he just looked bad. He looked bad. It's time to stop making excuses for this dude because everybody making excuses about, for Andy Dalton. No, he looks bad. He is not a good quarterback. I'm sorry. All right, the next week the Saints take on the Rams, and the Rams are having or had a horrible, horrible year. To say that they're the defending Super Bowl champs, and Saints took advantage of it. Barely won this game by the score of 27-20 against a struggling Rams team. They didn't have their best weapon in Cooper Kupp. Defense, they were missing pieces on defense. I know I'm coming off as complaining, and we won this game, but it wasn't impressive. It was nothing impressive about this game. You know, other than Andy Dalton looked pretty good in this game. This is one of his better games. He threw 3 touchdowns. But once again, in the fourth quarter, they did nothing. They kicked the field goal to make it a full touchdown lead. But they did nothing in the second half. Nothing. All right. The following week, the Saints took on the San Francisco 49ers. Now, once again, I have a lot of respect for the 49ers. They're one of the best teams in football. Right now, they are my favorite to win it all. I think they're probably the most complete team, even though they have a lot of injuries, especially in the quarterback position. They down to their third string quarterback, and they haven't missed a beat. In some cases, you can see that they're probably a little better with this third string quarterback. But even so, Saints defense was very, very impressive in this game. What hurt the Saints were turnovers in this game. They got to the red zone on 3 occasions and fumbled the ball. Got 0 points. Saints got shut out 13-0. I mean, they moved the ball at will. They moved the ball at will. They just couldn't capitalize. The telling stat from this game is the Saints' leading rusher for this game was Andy Dalton. He had 4 carries for 21 yards. That tells the story. That tells you everything you need to know about that what that was, week whatever matchup against the 49ers. All right, we go to the rematch with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Monday Night Football. Once again, there's still hope here, people. I'm still confident that the New Orleans Saints owned the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And early on, it looked like that's where we were headed. Saints, for the first 3 quarters, were leading this game 13-3. And I'm like, oh, man, here we go. We're going to have another Tom Brady meltdown. It was looking brutal. They couldn't do nothing. Tampa Bay only had 1 drive for the first 3 quarters, and that was the opening drive, and they settled for 3 points. Other than that, they never crossed the 50-yard line again until the fourth quarter, where they scored 14 unanswered points with 4 minutes left in the game. Tampa Bay wins 17-16. This was an embarrassing loss. I mean, humiliating loss. There's a vast majority that puts this loss on Mark Ingram's shoulders because he ran out of bounds on 3rd down, or was it 2nd down, a yard short of the 1st down. And on 3rd and 1, they tried a quick slant that was unsuccessful, and the Saints end up punting, I believe. And from that moment on, it was all Tampa Bay. I don't put it on Mark Ingram. Number one, Mark Ingram was hurt. Mark Ingram barely got the yards that he got. he barely. You realize 2 series before that he had to crawl off the field, and then they put him back in the game. He could barely walk, but they were asking him to run the ball. No, I'm not mad at Mark Ingram because Mark Ingram isn't the reason we lost the game. Defense couldn't stop Tom Brady. At the end of the game, it wasn't like he was playing defense. He wasn't playing linebacker. He wasn't playing corner. He wasn't playing safety. So why are we putting that on Mark Ingram? Saints fans, bro. Saints fans. We try to put the blame on people that don't deserve the blame. That man was hurt. And if history has taught us, especially in the last couple of weeks, when a player is hurt, it's time to take it seriously. Take that seriously. And they didn't take his injury seriously. And, it is what it is. And he hadn't played since. And all accounts are showing that he will not suit up as a Saint no more. This will be it for Mr. Mark Ingram as a New Orleans Saint. All right, the following week, the Saints had another rematch against the Atlanta Falcons. And now, up to this point, Saints are still in the playoff picture, even though they hold a record of 5-9 at this point. They're still in it. The Atlanta Falcons have a rookie quarterback in his first start here. And theoretically, you would say, okay, Saints should get him. I mean, this is a rookie. The rookie looked pretty decent. He didn't set the world on fire. He had less than 100 yards passing and everything. But I will tell you one rookie that looked impressive, and that was their running back at Gier, who ran over the New Orleans Saints defense. I think he had 140 yards rushing. He ran over the Saints. The problem came is when they tried to throw the ball. That's where they messed up. But once again, this was a tight one, and it didn't need to be tight. Saints scored 14 points in the first quarter, and they scored 7 points in the third quarter, and that's it. Fourth quarter, no points. Atlanta almost mustered up a comeback. They almost mustered up a comeback, but the Saints did come out victorious, 21-18. All right. Then we get to the Ice Bowl up there in Cleveland on Christmas Eve. The Saints took on the Cleveland Browns, and Saints won this game 17-10. This was an ugly game. It was ugly all around. I don't even have any notes for this one because it was like whoever won, it came down to who survived. Who was able to survive this game. Now the Saints did muster a comeback. It wasn't like the Saints were in firm control. It actually was 10-3 at halftime. Saints were down, and in the third quarter, the Saints scored 14 unanswered points, and the rest was history. But once again, fourth quarter, 0 points. But the Saints did win this game 17-10. Well, all right. We move on to Philadelphia. The one game when I saw the schedule this upcoming season, or last season, before the season started, rather, I knew for a fact, I don't know how the other games were going to turn out, but I knew for a fact Saints were going to lose this game. Boy, was I wrong. When we talk about impressive wins, this probably was impressive, but it was impressive for other reasons. It was impressive because the Saints actually won this game. Saints won 20-10 in Philly, mind you, against a Philadelphia team who at the time only lost 2 games. And, I mean, they look like world beaters. Now, Jalen Hurts didn't play in this game because he was hurt, ironically. Jalen Hurts was hurt. So, that played a big part in the Saints' victory, but that's how football goes. but the Saints were in firm control of this entire game. I mean, in complete control. I was shocked. I was amazed. And ultimately, the Saints won. Now, the Saints won 20-10. And at this point, the Saints were on a 3-game win streak. And for the first time in like 6 years, the Saints, it feel like 6 years. I could be wrong. It could be like 4 or 5 years. I can't remember, but it's too long if you think about it. This is the first time the Saints has had a 3-game win streak in a long time. You would think it was common under Sean Payton. It wasn't. Just take that for what it is. Now, Saints had one more game to go. They had an opportunity here to end the year on a 4-game win streak, really close out this season. Up to this point, the playoffs was out the picture. Saints lost the opportunity to make the playoffs despite beating the Philadelphia Eagles. But you still have a lot to play for. You have pride. You know, you have momentum. You want to go into the offseason with momentum. They played the Carolina Panthers just this past Sunday in the Superdome against Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold completed 5 passes for 43 yards and threw 2 interceptions. He had a quarterback rating of 2.8 in that game. He won the game. He beat the New Orleans Saints. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around how the New Orleans Saints lost this game. I understand we didn't have anything to play for. But, my God, people, y'all couldn't muster up any type of offense. Saints, on the opening drive, went straight down the field and scored. It was 7-0 for it felt like 3 hours. And then all of a sudden, Carolina just scored 10 unanswered points. Saints did not score no more after that opening drive. I can't make this stuff up. You would want to end the season on a high note, right? You will hope to, go into the offseason with some good vibes. You look at Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions played the Green Bay Packers for the final game of the regular season just this past Sunday. Green Bay had to win. If Green Bay would have won that game, they were going to the playoffs. Detroit found out that they weren't going to make the playoffs right before kickoff. You know what they said in the locker room before they came out? If we got to go home, they're going to go home. We're going to give it our all out there today. Detroit went out there and played. Detroit went out there and probably played one of their best games this year. I mean, all around complete game. They didn't light up the scoreboard per se, but they were aggressive. They were hitting. They were playing like they were literally playing to get into the play. This was their Super Bowl. They noticed this was it. Their season was over. They went out there and played like that was their Super Bowl because that was their last game of the year. Saints played like whatever. I can't make this stuff up. Throughout this season, Saints scored a grand total of 330 points. All 17 games. To put this in perspective, in 2011, the Saints scored 547 points, and they played one less game. Remember, it was a 16-game season then. you know, I can't I can't express how much I feel that Pete Carmichael has to go. Pete Carmichael he got to go. Um, he never should have been the offensive coordinator, and the reason is because he didn't want to be the offensive coordinator. They begged him to come back, and he came back. He came back. He know his strengths. Now he can script an opening drive, as you saw throughout this season. As we broke it down, the first quarter, that opening drive is spot on. It is pitch perfect. But as you saw, as we broke it down game by game, in the second half, the Saints can't do nothing. Couldn't do nothing because they didn't adjust. He doesn't know how to adjust. And the Saints suffered. I mean, it was this it was embarrassing watching the New Orleans Saints. It's especially that final game against Carolina. That was an embarrassing display of football. And I don't understand for the life of me how Dennis Allen still has his job. I don't get it. Gone are the days of Kevin Reed getting on this show and saying, man, I'm not advocating for people to lose their jobs, blah, blah, blah. No, them days are over. He needs to lose his job. Because you go, for all of us who work, which I'm pretty sure is the vast majority of us listening to this show, or you have had a job in the past, you underperform on your job week in, week out, day in, day out, whenever you're up for evaluation. And they look at your merits and, your work load, or whatever profession you're in. And they see that you haven't improved, you haven't progressed, a lack of knowledge of the job. You think you're going to get a raise? You think you're going to get some type of promotion? No, them people are going to fire you or demote you or just keep you in the position that you've been in for the past 50 years or whatever the case may be. You'll never move up. No job rewards you for foolishness, for a horrible work ethic. And this is what Dennis Allen has given you. Every week he got to come up there on the podium after the game press conference and all this here post game conference and sit there and say, oh, we got to clean this up. Oh, we got to get better at this. We got to get better at that. You can stomach that for the first 3 weeks of the season. If you're still hearing that in week 17, week 18, that's a problem. That's a problem you need to solve. And the only way to solve it is to get rid of. That means you haven't coached these guys up. You haven't improved. These guys haven't improved. Throughout the season, they were getting worse until they went on that little 3-game win streak, which you can make an argument if you really break it down. They really didn't get much better. They just got lucky in sorts. They played a hurt Philadelphia team who didn't have their starting quarterback. They played a Browns team in a snow globe. You played the Falcons, who started a rookie quarterback for the first time. That was your 3-game win streak. A rookie quarterback, a quarterback who was just coming off a 12-game suspension in minus 15-degree weather, and a backup quarterback who came in for an MVP caliber quarterback. Those are the 3 quarterbacks you played in that 3-game win streak. So I'm not putting any merit to that. None of that. None of that. And so the Saints were horrible this season. But it isn't all bad. It isn't all bad. We did have some players who actually came to play this year. They actually showed up every Sunday and tried their best. Let's go through the season stats throughout the year. Starting with passing. Of course, the leading passer for the New Orleans Saints this season was Andy Dalton. He had a 66.7 completion ratio. He threw for 2,871 yards this season. He threw 18 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Jameis Winston comes in second. He was 63.5% as far as his completion percentage. He threw for 858 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Taysom Hill threw the ball this year, believe it or not. He was 68.4. He had the better completion percentage out of him because he threw the ball less. 240 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Andy Dalton was also sacked 25 times this year. The leading rusher for the New Orleans Saints this season is, of course, Alvin Kamara. He ran the ball 223 times for 897 yards. One of the only times Alvin Kamara has not went over 1,000 yards. This is the first time in his career as a New Orleans Saint or in the NFL, he hasn't gone over 1,000 yards, even collectively. That's including receiving yards as well. He has 2 touchdowns. Two. The whole season. Crazy. Taysom Hill was our second leading rusher. He ran the ball 96 times for 575 yards and 7 touchdowns. Mark Ingram, he carried the ball 62 times for 233 yards and 1 touchdown. Latavius Murray, when he was here for a cup of coffee, he ran the ball 11 times for 57 yards and 1 touchdown. Shahid Shadid, he carried the ball 4 times for 57 yards and 1 touchdown. Our leading receiver this year, comes to no surprise, is none other than possible rookie of the year candidate, Chris Olave. He had 1,042 receiving yards this season with 4 touchdowns. Jawan Johnson had 508 yards receiving with 7 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara had 90 yards. I don't know what I was looking at. 90 yards with 2 touchdowns. Well, with that being said, he did go over 1,000 yards collective, all purpose. So I take that back. My apologies. Rashid Shaheed, he had 488 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. And Jarvis Landry, he had 272 yards and 1 touchdown. Traquan Smith had 278 yards, 1 touchdown. Adam Thielen, 207 yards, 1 touchdown. Michael Thomas, before his toe went kaput, he had 171 yards and 3 touchdowns. Marquez Callaway, 158 yards and 1 touchdown. Taysom Hill had 77 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. Kevin Wright had 74 yards. I forgot he was on the team. Mark Ingram had 68 yards. And everybody else is in like double digits. Defensively, our defensive leader this year, as far as tackles are concerned, is Demario Davis, our Pro Bowler this season, our only Pro Bowler on the team. He had 109 tackles this season. He also had 6.5 sacks this season as well. He had 1 interception and 1 fumble recovery. Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, he was second on the team with tackles with 91 tackles, 1 sack, 3 interceptions, and 1 forced fumble and 1 fumble recovery. Pete Warner, who was the leading tackler for a while before he got hurt, he had 80 tackles this season with 0 interceptions. He had 2 forced fumbles, no recoveries. Caden Ellis, Another revelation this year. He had 78 tackles this year and 7 sacks. Cam Jordan, he had 66 tackles this year with 8.5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. Uh, who's the next one? Marcus May. Marcus May had 60 tackles this year. No interceptions, but 1 forced fumble. Paulson Adebo, he had a bit of a sophomore slump this year, but he's still solid in my book. He had 60 tackles this year. Carl Grandison, he had a pretty decent year in my humble opinion. He had 53 tackles, 5.5 sacks this year. And Shy Tuttle, he had 49 tackles this year, 2 sacks. And Alante Taylor, another shining light. Uh, I mean, that was a steal in the draft. Alante Taylor. He really, really, I think he's going to end up pushing Paulson Adebo in camp next year. Uh, I don't know. They're going to battle it out for that spot. It's going to be an interesting camp battle there. Alante Taylor had 46 tackles this year, 11 pass defenses. And David Agumaga, he had 43 tackles this year, 5 sacks. And Bradley Roby, he had 36 tackles this year. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Oh. I wanted to mention Marshawn Lattimore. Marshawn Lattimore had 29 tackles this year, 1 interception. Uh, yeah. Oh, and Marcus Davenport. Definitely want to mention him. Give a shout out to old Marcus Davenport because I believe this is it. I think that's it for Marcus Davenport. We tried. We I'm not mad at the Saints for picking him. They tried, and it just ain't working. Marcus Davenport had 29 tackles this season, point 0.5. That's a half a sack all year. That's all he did. To put that in perspective, JT Great, a safety, had 2.5 sacks. A safety. So Peyton Turner had 2 sacks this year. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. Happy trails, Marcus Davenport. All right, team stats. As a team, total points per game. Saints averaged 19.4 points per game. Their opponents averaged 20.3. Total points, I mentioned it earlier, Saints had 330 points total this season. Their opponents had 345. Total touchdowns, Saints had 37 touchdowns this season. The opponents had 35 touchdowns. First downs, total first downs, Saints had 305 first downs this season. Their opponents had 319. By rushing, Saints gained a first down 103 times by rushing, 181 times by passing. First downs by penalties, Saints had 21 by penalty. Third down efficiency this season, Saints were 88 for 219. That is ridiculous. That is a 40% on third down this season. Unbelievable. On fourth down is even worse. They were 4 for 11. That's 36%. Passing, Saints net passing yardage 3,692. Their opponents 3,134. Yards per pass attempt, Saints average 7.8 yards per pass attempt. The opponents 6.4. Net passing yardage per game. This is per game average. Saints average 217.2 yards per game passing. The opponents 184.4. Passing touchdowns, Saints scored 24 passing touchdowns to the opponent's 17. Interceptions thrown, Saints 14 to the opponent's 7. Uh, Saints quarterbacks were sacked 38 times this season. Saints recorded 48 sacks. Rushing, Saints had 1,982 yards of rushing this season. Saints gave up 2,218 yards rushing. Average per rush, Saints averaged 4.3 yards per rush. Saints opponents averaged 4.5 yards per rush. Per game rushing yardage, Saints averaged 116.6 yards per game running the ball. Saints opponents averaged 130.5 per game against them. Total offense, you know, it don't make sense. That I looked at that and I got upset. Okay, time of possession, Saints lose time of possession by what, 29 seconds. They averaged having the ball 29 minutes and 31 seconds. Opponents have the ball for 30 minutes and 28 seconds, and that's all you need in the league. Just 30 seconds, 30 more seconds. Turnover ratio, this is where it's just utterly ridiculous when it comes to the Saints. Saints were minus 11 this year in turnovers. They turned the ball over way too much. Way too much. They averaged at least one a game. I'm sorry, two a game. It was horrible. It was a horrible display of discipline. Even with penalties, Saints had 99 penalties this season. It was just, I don't know, man. It was just the ugliest type of football you ever want to see. Which drives home the point. Why is Sean Payton? Why is Dennis Allen still on the sidelines for the New Orleans Saints? I don't get it. Now, when I drop this show, it's going to be pretty early in the week. And so something may change. I may get shocked. And they may fire Dennis Allen. And trust me, if they do, you can expect an impromptu Dome Patrol podcast episode to drop immediately following that announcement. But as it stands right now, this is what it is. And I'm just I'm just really disappointed with this team. I was gonna do a look ahead to the offseason and see what we need to do as a team going forward, but I'm gonna hold that off. I'm gonna do another show. I'm gonna hold that off because that's another long one, and I've already gone over the hour limit that I gave myself. So we're gonna do another show about the look ahead for this upcoming offseason, what holes we need to fill, what positions we need to improve on. I'm not even going to touch the coaching staff because that's out of anybody's control. And I'm saying that like I can control the players too, but we're just going to take it slow and give it its own episode for the offseason, what we need to look at in the draft. If we manage to get a first round pick, this is pending Sean Payton goes back to coaching and we can negotiate a trade for a first round draft pick for Sean Payton, because I'm not accepting anything less than a first round draft pick. You can kick rocks with anything else. We need two. We need this year and next year. At the very least, I'll take a first round this year and a second round next year. That's at the very least. That's the floor. So we're going to negotiate up from there. And so we'll see how that go. Like, I never put too much stock in that rumor that Sean Payton was going to return to New Orleans, which is still a possibility. It's still a possibility, but I'm not holding my breath on that. And even if he do, like I said in previous episode, I'm not 100% with that too, because I still have mixed feelings about him, how he left. Because look how he left us. Look what he did. He left us, and this team looks like a shell of what it was. And that's with more talent on the field. And so we'll see moving forward. But yeah. So we're gonna stop right there. This is part one, I guess you could say, of the breakdown. And we're gonna come back and do another episode of the Dawn Patrol podcast where we look ahead. We just look back. Now we're gonna look ahead. So be on the lookout for that. It should be dropping the same day. If not the same day, the very next day. I'll see how that goes because we have other episodes, other shows that will be released on the KB Radio Network this week as well. And I don't want to butt them all up against each other. So I'll see how that works out. But we will have a part two when we look ahead and see how the New Orleans Saints will move forward, or how I feel the Saints should move forward starting right now at the beginning of this offseason with coaching and players and positions that need to be changed and things of that nature, and a look ahead to next season. So how do you feel about this season? Do you feel it was a wash, or do you feel Dennis Allen deserves another shot? I would love to hear that one. And I want to know why. Don't just say, yeah, he deserves another shot. Have a good day. No, I need to know. I need you to go into an explanation. I need to know why you feel that way. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. Also, hit me up on Twitter at the KB Radio Network. Oh, no, it's at KB Radio Network. And look up the KB Radio Network on all social media platforms. There's an easy way to get in touch with the show there as well. Don't forget about the 5 stars. Don't forget about the reviews or sharing the show. It helps the show out tremendously if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other listening platform you're currently listening to the Dawn Patrol podcast on. Everybody, thank you for joining me throughout this entire season. I know it was tough because it was tough doing these shows. It was tough. This was a hard year to watch the New Orleans Saints and especially break it down. I tried to break it down the best I could. I was mostly depressed doing these shows. I was trying to put on a happy face, but it was depressing doing these shows this season. Hopefully it'll get better. But thank you for joining me throughout this season. We still have more to talk about. Can't wait to talk about it then. And despite the fact we fell short on a lot of things this year, it looked like poo-poo. It looked like the worst team in football at times. But even with all that, guess what? Ain't nothing changed, baby. Ain't nothing changed. I'm still bleeding back black and gold, and I'm still gonna be screaming. Who that?